Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to admit, when I first looked at the stack of papers for today's episode, I actually laughed out loud.
I can imagine.
Not because it was funny, but because it felt,
Yeah.
well, impossible. We are talking about a theory that claims to rewrite the entire operating system of the universe.
It is definitely not a light read. It's one of those topics that, it forces you to take everything you learned in high school physics, put it in a box,
A very secure box.
and then gently, or perhaps not so gently, kick that box down a long flight of stairs.
Exactly. And I want to get to the elephant in the room right away. The title of the source material we're covering is Supersymmetric Geometric Quantum Mechanics.
It's a mouthful.
It is. But the subtitle is what really stopped me in my tracks. The Aetheron Model.
Right. I can see why that would give you pause.
Right. Aether. I mean, come on. Isn't that the stuff Victorian scientists with, monocles thought filled the universe before Einstein came along and basically said, actually, no, space is empty?
He did.
I thought we killed the ether idea back in, 1887?
You're thinking of the Michelson-Morley experiment, and you were absolutely right. That experiment was designed to find the lumiferous aether.
The light-bearing ether.
Exactly. Scientists at the time thought it was this invisible gas or fluid that light waves swam through, kind of like how sound waves swim through air.
Makes sense.
So they looked for the wind of this ether as the Earth moved through space, and they found nothing. Zero, a big fat zero. So physics moved on. We accepted the vacuum, the void.
So why are we digging up ghosts? Why is the author, Aaron Buscemi, bringing this word back from the dead? Is this just, I don't know, nostalgia, or is there something we missed?
It's definitely not nostalgia, and it's really, really important to make a distinction here. Buscemi isn't talking about that old-fashioned gas.
Okay.
He's borrowing the word to describe something fundamentally different. He's proposing that the vacuum of space, the nothingness between you and me, between the Earth and the Moon, isn't empty at all.
It's not a void.
He argues it is a dense, living, geometric structure.
Okay, hold on. So when I look up at the night sky and I see the black space between the stars, I'm not seeing nothing. I'm seeing a structure that my eyes just can't perceive.
Precisely. The core premise of supersymmetric geometric quantum mechanics, and yeah, let's just call it SGQM or the Aetheron Model from here on out,
Please.
is that space-time is not a passive stage where actors like planets and atoms play out their parts. The stage is the actor.
The stage is the thing.
The Aetheron is described as a 12-dimensional rotational manifold.
Okay, you dropped the D word.
Dimensions.
And not just 3 or 4, which we can kind of wrap our heads around. 12.
12.
My brain actively struggles with 4, let alone 12. So before we get lost in the hyperdimensional weeds, let's define the mission here. Why do we even need this model? We have quantum mechanics for atoms. We have general relativity for gravity. They work pretty well, don't they?
They work brilliantly in their own corners, and that's the great tragedy of modern physics. We have two perfect theories that absolutely hate each other.
They don't talk at parties.
Not at all. Quantum mechanics explains the very small particles, probability, that fuzzy world of uncertainty. General relativity explains the very large gravity, planets, the curvature of space-time. But if you try to combine the math...
Like inside a black hole.
Exactly. Inside a black hole where it's both very, very heavy and very, very small, the math just explodes. You get infinities. It breaks down completely.
So physics has been stuck with this fundamental divorce for, 100 years now?
Pretty much. And most attempts to fix it involve incredibly complex, abstract mathematics, things like string theory, which, requires tiny vibrating strings that we can never, ever see.
Right, it's all math.
Buscemi's approach is different. He wants to bridge the gap using geometry.
Geometry, like triangles and shapes from school.
Literal geometry. The argument is that the universe isn't made of math equations, it's made of shapes. The equations just describe the shapes.
I like that.
And if we can understand the geometry of this Aetheron, this background fabric, we can explain everything. From why light moves at the speed it does, to why atoms stick together, to what gravity actually is.
Okay, that feels more tactile, more real.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to visualize this Aetheron. If it's not a gas, what does it look like? If I could put on magic 12-dimensional glasses, what would I see?
Imagine a lattice, a grid. But not a grid of simple lines. Imagine a lattice of interconnected Pythagorean triangles filling the entire universe.
A universe made of triangles. That's kind of beautiful.
It's a useful analogy. Think of it like a chainmail vest, or maybe a dense crystal structure. Every single point in space is connected to every other point through this geometric logic.
And it's just sitting there.
No, absolutely not. This lattice isn't static. It's spinning. It has rotational properties. That's a key part of the whole model.
So if I wave my hand through the air, I'm not moving through an empty void. I'm actually pushing through a lattice of spinning triangles.
You're creating a disturbance in the geometry. In this model, mass, energy, force. These aren't things that you drop into the box of the universe.
They're part of the box.
They are just different ways that this geometric fabric twists and rotates. You, me, this microphone, the listener, we are all just really, really complicated knots in the Aetheron.
That is humbling.
Yeah.
And also slightly terrifying, but it sets the stage perfectly. We aren't dealing with particles and void. We're dealing with a single unified geometric thing.
Correct. And because it is geometric, it has rules, rigid, unbreakable rules. And that brings us to the very foundation of the entire theory.
The math. Okay, now I promised the listeners we wouldn't turn this into a calculus class, but there is one equation we absolutely have to talk about because it replaces, or maybe upgrades, the most famous equation in history.
You mean E equals mc squared?
Right, Einstein's big one. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. It connects mass and energy. SGQM looks at that and says, that's cute, but let's look at the triangle.
It generalizes Einstein using the Pythagorean theorem. You remember that from school, right? A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Oh yeah, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. I can still recite it in my sleep.
Well, Buscemi applies that to reality itself. The core equation is alpha squared equals mu squared plus e rot squared.
Okay, let me repeat that so it really sinks in. Alpha squared equals mu squared plus e rot squared. Let's break down the players here. What is alpha?
Alpha, which is spelled A-L-P-H-A, or the Greek letter alpha, is the hypotenuse. It represents the Aetheron invariant.
Invariant, meaning it never changes.
It never changes. Think of it as the total geometric magnitude of a single unit of space. It's the structural floor of reality. It is the c in your a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The length of that hypotenuse is absolutely fixed.
Okay, so we have a fixed long side of the triangle. What are the other two sides? The legs of the triangle.
The other two sides are mu, that's mu, or the Greek letter mu, and erot, E sub R-O-T. Mu represents mass. Erot represents rotational energy.
And since they are the legs of a right triangle,
They are orthogonal. They are at a perfect 90-degree angle to each other.
I want to pause here because orthogonal is one of those words that sounds fancy, but the implication here is just huge. If mass and energy are at 90 degrees, that means they are fundamentally independent directions.
It means there are two projections of the same thing. It's the most important relationship. Think of a ladder leaning against a wall. The ladder has a fixed length. That's alpha. It can't get longer or shorter.
I'm picturing the ladder. Okay.
Now you can slide the bottom of the ladder out, away from the wall, that distance along the floor. Let's call that energy. But if you pull the bottom out, what happens to the top of the ladder?
It slides down the wall. The height decreases.
Exactly. The height up the wall, let's call that mass, decreases. You can trade height for distance or mass for energy, but you cannot, under any circumstances, change the length of the ladder itself.
So the universe is constantly trying to keep the ladder from breaking.
In a way, yes. This equation enforces a structural floor. In standard physics, you can theoretically add infinite energy to a system. The math lets you go wild. But in SGQM, the geometry itself says, stop.
There's a hard limit.
You are limited by the length of the ladder. As mass increases, rotational energy must adjust to preserve the shape of the manifold, to keep that hypotenuse alpha constant.
This is the balancing act you mentioned earlier.
It's a geometric necessity. The universe balances itself not because of some magical law, but because the geometry simply won't allow it to do anything else. It enforces what's called bounded behavior.
Which solves the infinity problem we talked about with black holes. You can't have infinite density or infinite energy because you run out of ladder.
Precisely. And this geometric approach changes how we view everything, especially speed.
Ah, yes. The cosmic speed limit. This is one of my favorite parts of the research. We've all been told that nothing can go faster than the speed of light. It's the ultimate unbreakable rule, the letter C.
Roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. It's the speed limit sign on the cosmic highway.
But usually when I ask why, physics teachers just say, well, it just is. It's a constant of nature. Or they'll say, you need infinite energy to get there, which we now know isn't possible anyway. SGQM gives a much more mechanical, much more intuitive explanation.
It does. It reframes C entirely. In this model, c is not a travel velocity. It isn't about how fast a photon can run a marathon from the sun to the Earth.
Okay, so what is it?
It is a measure of phase synchronization.
Phase synchronization, that sounds like technical jargon. Break that down.
Think of it as the maximum vibrational frequency or the rotational coherence of the space-time fabric itself. The Aetheron lattice, our grid of triangles, has an internal update rate. It spins. There's a maximum speed at which it can spin and pass information to its neighbor.
Okay, I have an analogy for this from the notes that I absolutely love. I want everyone listening to visualize a propeller, an old school airplane propeller.
A great visual.
When that propeller is stationary, you can stick your hand through the blades easily. No problem. But start spinning it. As it spins faster and faster, it starts to meet more resistance from the air. But more than that, the solidness of that disk increases.
It becomes a barrier.
Right. And SGQM suggests that as you approach the speed of light, you aren't just moving through space, you're trying to outrun the internal rotation of space itself.
That is the rotational barrier. You are trying to push matter through the lattice faster than the lattice can synchronize its own rotation to let you pass. It's like trying to run through a revolving door that is spinning at a fixed maximum speed.
If you try to run faster than the door is spinning,
You smack right into the glass.
so the speed of light is the RPM of the universe, the engine's red line.
Essentially, yes, it is the update rate of the Aetheron grid. And this leads to perhaps the most mind-bending concept in this entire stack of papers, the non-propagation hypothesis.
This broke my brain. I'm not kidding. I had to read this section 3 times to even begin to get it. Buscemi claims that light doesn't travel. Okay, stop. Just stop. The sunlight hitting my face right now took 8 minutes to get here from the sun. It traveled. NASA tracks signals traveling to Mars probes. How can you possibly say light doesn't travel?
It feels like it travels, the effect is travel, but let's go back to the lattice. If space is filled with these interconnected triangles, how does energy move? Think of the wave in a sports stadium.
Okay, you mean when everyone stands up, throws their arms up, and then sits back down and the pattern moves around the stadium?
Yes. Does the wave travel?
Of course, I can see it moving across the sections. It's clearly moving.
Do the people travel?
No. The guy in section 101 stays in section 101. He just stands up and sits down.
Yeah.
He doesn't run around the stadium.
Okay.
Exactly. The people don't move. The pattern does.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. In SGQM, the people are the Aetheron units, are triangles. They don't move from the sun to the earth. They stay in their fixed positions.
They just stand up and sit down.
They just rotate or get excited and then trigger their neighbor to do the same, which triggers the next one, and so on. The light is just the wave of synchronization passing through the lattice.
That actually makes a bizarre kind of sense. But it changes everything. So a photon isn't a little bullet flying through a void. It's a domino effect in the fabric of space.
It is a local geometric adjustment passed from neighbor to neighbor. And this explains precisely why there is a speed limit. The wave can only move as fast as the people can stand up and sit down. The reaction time of the Aetheron units is the speed of light.
So the 8-minute delay from the sun isn't travel time. It's the cumulative reaction time across the entire grid between here and there.
That is a perfect way to put it.
But wait a minute. If this is true, and the speed of light is determined by the density or the tightness of this grid, shouldn't the speed of light change if the grid itself changes?
You've just hit on a major and very testable prediction of the model.
Okay.
Standard physics says c is an absolute constant. Everywhere, forever, it's the same. SGQM predicts that c is variable.
Variable light speed. I mean, that's heresy in physics. That it breaks so many things.
It does, but think about it logically within this framework. If you are near a black hole, gravity is crushing the lattice. The density of the Aetheron is changing. The geometry is under extreme stress.
The people in the stadium are packed closer together.
Right. And the model suggests that in these extreme environments, the synchronization speed, the ability of those people to stand up and sit down and pass the message along, might slow down or speed up.
So near a black hole, the cosmic speed limit sign might change from 300,000 kilometers per second to something else.
Exactly. The geometry dictates the speed. If you warp the geometry, you change the constants. It turns fundamental constants into variables that are dependent on the local environment.
That is wild. It makes the universe feel so much more mechanical. You know, like a machine we can actually take apart and understand.
And if we're talking about mechanics, we have to look under the hood of the atom. Because if space is a lattice, then what is matter? What is an atom actually made of?
This is where we get into the hidden gears of the universe.
The strong course.
Right. So quick refresher for everyone. Atoms have a nucleus, which is made of protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons are made of even smaller things called quarks.
And the force holding those quarks together is appropriately called the strong force.
The strongest force in nature, by far.
And in school, I was always told about gluons, the particle that carries the strong force. And honestly, I always just picture them as little dots of glue, just sticky little things that keep the quarks from flying apart.
That is the standard model view. Gluons are exchange particles. But SGQM asks the deeper question. How does the glue work? What's the mechanism? You can't just say it sticks and be done with it.
Right, what is the stickiness?
So what is a quark in this Aetheron model, if it's not just a tiny ball?
A quark is a localized, topologically stable rotational excitation.
A twist.
A tiny, stable twist in the fabric of space. A knot. But here is the problem with a single twist in a lattice. It's phase unstable.
What does that mean?
Imagine taking a piece of elastic netting and twisting one section of it really tight. What does that section want to do?
It wants to snap back, unwind immediately.
Exactly. A single quark is like a spring under immense tension. It cannot exist alone because the geometry of the lattice wants to flatten it out. This provides a beautiful mechanical explanation for confinement.
And confinement is the rule that says we have never, ever found a single quark by itself in nature.
Never. They are always in pairs or triplets.
Because you need another twist to lock it in place, to balance the tension.
Precisely. You need a counter twist. You need to close the geometric loop so the tension is balanced internally.
Okay, I have another audio hook here that really helped me visualize this. We talked about propellers. Now let's talk about watches. If two gears in a watch aren't aligned, the watch stops. Quarks are like those gears. The color charge, which is what physicists call the charge of quarks, is just the alignment of their teeth. When they lock, they create the most stable structure in the universe, the proton.
That gear analogy is incredibly accurate to the model. In physics, we say quarks have color charge. We use labels like red, green, and blue.
Which have nothing to do with actual colors.
Nothing at all. It's just a label for a type of charge. But in SGQM, color is not a label. It's an angle. It's the literal geometric orientation of the GU teeth within the 12-dimensional structure.
So if you have a red quark and a blue quark, it really means you have a quark twisted at angle A and another quark twisted at angle B.
And if those angles mesh, if the gears lock perfectly, the tension is resolved, the structure becomes stable. That locking is what we perceive as the strong force. It's not a magical glue. It is mechanical geometric interlocking.
It's the elastic integrity of the Aetheron. It's the fabric itself resisting being torn.
Yes. You are literally knotting the fabric of space so tightly that it can't undo itself. That is what a proton is, an unbelievably stable geometric knot.
And this leads to a fascinating and pretty controversial prediction about the periodic table of elements.
It does.
We keep trying to make new, heavier elements in labs. We're up to element 118, oganesson, which, lives for a fraction of a millisecond. We just assume if we smash things together hard enough, we can make element 119, 120, and so on forever.
The standard model hopes for an island of stability somewhere further up the chart, where super heavy elements might suddenly become stable again.
But SGQM says, stop. There is a hard limit.
It says there is. The model predicts that there are only 58 fundamental geometric equilibrium points in the Aetheron's rotational symmetry group.
Wait, hold on. Only 58. But we have 118 on the chart right now.
We have 118 that we have forced into existence for tiny moments. But how many are truly fundamentally stable? How many don't decay? The stable elements all appear much earlier on the table. SGQM suggests that beyond a certain point of complexity, you are fundamentally fighting the geometry.
It's like trying to build a Jenga tower on a slanted table. You can force a few extra blocks on top, and they might stay for a second. But the underlying geometry of the table eventually says no.
That's a perfect analogy. The geometry will eventually just reject the structure. It can't support it. This is a hard, falsifiable prediction. If we find that we absolutely cannot synthesize stable elements past a certain point, or that the stability drops off exactly as the Aetheron geometry predicts, that is huge evidence for this theory.
So we've covered the very fast, the speed of light, and the very small, the quarks in a proton. I want to zoom out to the massive, the thing that keeps us in our chairs, gravity.
The force that dominates the cosmos.
And the standard view, again, comes from Einstein. It's the rubber sheet analogy. We've all seen the diagram. You put a heavy bowling ball on a trampoline, it curves the fabric, and a little marble rolls toward it.
That is the classic visualization of general relativity. Mass tells spacetime how to curve, And the curve of spacetime tells mass how to move.
A beautiful idea. But SGQM says throw away the rubber sheet, or at least stop thinking of it as a static passive sheet.
The problem with the rubber sheet is that it's passive. It just sits there and gets bent. SGQM proposes that gravity acts more like a weather system.
A weather system. Explain that. That sounds chaotic.
It's not so much chaotic as it is dynamic. It suggests gravity arises from rotational coherence, specifically the mathematics of something called the Kuramoto synchronization model.
Whoa, Kuramoto. That sounds like a kaiju from a monster movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually a mathematical model used to explain how large groups of independent things spontaneously sync up.
Like what?
Like fireflies in a field all starting to flash in unison, or an entire audience clapping and their claps slowly falling into a single rhythm, or metronomes on a table eventually ticking together.
Okay, so things in nature have a tendency to sync up. How does that create gravity?
Imagine the Earth. It's a massive knot of particles, a huge collection of these geometric twists all spinning and rotating together in the Aetheron. This massive cluster of coherent rotation forces the surrounding lattice to try and sync up with it. It drags the synchronization of the space around it.
So it's not bending the sheet. It's twisting the flow of space.
It creates a flow of synchronization, a gradient. And that flow is what we feel as gravity. We are being pulled into the synchronized rhythm of the Earth.
The notes mention something called a rank 2 tensor. Now, I have to be the skeptic here. That sounds like Star Trek technobabble.
Yeah.
Captain, the rank 2 tensors are failing. Translate that for me.
Fair point. It's just a mathematical term for complexity. In math, a rank 2 tensor is just a single number, like temperature. It's a dot, no direction.
Got it.
A rank 1 tensor is a vector, like wind. It has a speed and a single direction, a line.
Okay.
A rank 2 tensor describes stress and strain. Imagine a block of gelatin. If you push down on the top, the sides bulge out. The forces are moving in multiple directions at once. It's a complete map of tension and pressure in a system.
Okay, so the Aetheron isn't just wind blowing in one direction, rank 1. It's a block of gelatin under stress, with forces pushing and pulling everywhere, rank 2.
Exactly. It's a fluid flow of stress and rotation. And thinking of it this way gives us a totally new and powerful image for extreme gravity events, like two black holes merging.
And here's the hook I loved for this. When black holes merge, they don't just shake space, they stir it like a giant blender. We are listening for the whirlpool effects, the extra ripples that tell us there's more than just 4D space at play.
That blender analogy is spot on. When two black holes collide, general relativity says they should release gravitational waves, those are the ripples, and then settle down. Like hitting a bell. It rings beautifully, and then it fades away smoothly, a clean ring down.
But SGQM predicts something else, something messier.
It predicts echoes.
Echoes. That's spooky. What do you mean?
Post-merger echoes. Think about why you get an echo.
Yeah.
If you shout in an open field, the sound just radiates away. No echo.
Right.
If you shout in a canyon, the sound bounces off the walls and comes back to you. You get echoes. Standard physics assumes empty space is an open field. SGQM says space is a canyon.
With walls.
Yes. The walls are the internal geometry of the 12 dimensions. So when this massive amount of energy from the merger is released, some of it doesn't just radiate away, it bounces around inside the higher dimensional structure and comes back to us as faint, repeating echoes after the main event.
And have we? Have we heard these echoes?
This is at the cutting edge. There are researchers looking at the public data from LIGO, the Gravitational Wave Observatory, who claim they see hints of these echoes buried in the noise. It's highly controversial. It's not confirmed, but if it is,
It's the smoking gun.
it would be the smoking gun that space has a higher dimensional structure, that it's not an open field, it's a canyon.
That gives me chills. We are literally listening for the shape of the universe.
We are. And speaking of black holes, there is one more massive problem that SGQM claims to fix: the singularity.
The place where math goes to die. The division by zero error.
Right. Standard physics says that in the center of a black hole, matter is crushed to a point of zero volume and infinite density.
Which is, by definition, impossible. A physical impossibility.
It's physically meaningless. Nature doesn't do infinite. SGQM introduces what it calls the bouncing law. Remember the ladder, remember alpha, the invariant.
The structural floor. The minimum possible length.
You cannot compress the geometry of space smaller than that fundamental unit, alpha. It's a hard floor. So when gravity tries to crush the Aetheron down to a single point, the geometry itself fights back. It hits the floor.
So what happens? Does it explode?
It spins. The collapse is redirected from a vertical crushing force into a rotational one. It transforms the linear momentum of the collapse into angular momentum in the higher dimensions.
So the black hole doesn't collapse to a dot. It collapses to a super spinning geometric knot. A vortex.
A finite, maximally spinning structure. It spins up into the dimensions we can't see. The geometry saves itself from breaking by spinning.
When geometry saves itself. I love that phrase. It implies the universe has a kind of self-preservation mechanism built in.
It implies determinism.
Yeah.
It implies that the math holds up all the way down. There's no point where the laws of physics just give up and say, magic happens here. The rules always apply.
Okay, we have one final section to cover, and this is arguably the most abstract, but also the most unifying. We need to talk about the ghost in the atom. We need to talk about supersymmetry.
The shadow world.
Now, in pop science, supersymmetry, or SUSY, usually means that for every particle we know and love, there is a heavy, undiscovered partner particle.
Right. For the electron, there should be a selectron. For the quark, a squark. For the neutrino or neutralino, these shadow particles.
And we built the Large Hadron Collider in part to find these guys. We smashed protons together, hoping to see them pop out. And
Crickets. Nothing. We haven't found a single one.
So is supersymmetry dead? Was it just a nice idea that didn't pan out?
The standard model version of it is definitely on life support, but SGQM comes in and says, you aren't finding them because you are looking for the wrong thing. You're looking for a completely separate particle hiding under a rock.
But if it's not a separate particle, what is it?
SGQM says supersymmetry isn't about extra particles. It's about the geometry of the cycle. It's about the flip side of the same coin.
Okay, here's the last audio hook, and it's a good one. Think of a coin spinning on a table. You see the head side, let's call that the fermions, and you see the tail side, the bosons. SGQM says you can't have the rotation without both sides of the coin. Every particle we see is just half of a complete geometric whole.
That is the key. We tend to think of fermions, which are matter particles, stuff like electrons and quarks, and bosons, which are force-carrying particles like photons, as totally different species. SGQM says they're the same object, just viewed from different angles of its rotation. They are orthogonal projections of one another.
Back to the 90-degree angle again. The ladder.
Always back to the ladder. The selectron isn't a new particle you can find. It is the electron, but just in its bothonic phase of rotation.
Okay, to understand these phases, we need to look at the numbers. The research mentions a 720-degree cycle versus a 1440-degree cycle.
This is a real, experimentally verified fact of quantum mechanics that trips everyone up. If you take an electron and you rotate it 360 degrees, one full circle, it does not return to its original state.
Which is just bizarre.
It's deeply strange. Its wave function is inverted. You have to rotate it a full 720 degrees, 2 complete circles, to get it back to where it started.
I just don't get that. If I spin around in my chair 360 degrees, I'm facing the mic again. I'm back. Why does an electron need to spin twice?
The best analogy is a Mobius strip. That's a strip of paper you give a half twist to before taking the ends together. If you start drawing a line along the surface, one full loop brings you to the bottom side of the paper. You have to do a second full loop to get back to the top where you started.
Okay, so the electron is traveling along a path that is a built-in twist.
Exactly. And that 720-degree cycle, or 4-pi rotation, defines matter. That is what we see and interact with as a particle. But SGQM says that's only half the story. There is a supercycle that is 1440 degrees. That's 8 pi, 4 full circles.
My head is spinning just thinking about it.
Stick with me here. The first part of the cycle, from 0 to 720 degrees, defines matter, the particle. The second half of the cycle, from 720 to 1440 degrees, defines antimatter.
Whoa. So antimatter isn't some rare, exotic substance from Star Trek. It's just the second half of the loop.
In this model, yes, matter and antimatter are just different phases of the same fundamental geometric cycle. And somewhere in that transition, the nature of the object flips from being a fermion matter to a boson force and back again.
This is the ultimate unification. You're telling me that matter, antimatter, and force are all just different points on the same roller coaster ride.
Geometric unity that removes the spookiness. It's not that there are ghost particles we can't find. It's that we are only ever perceiving half of the complete cycle at any given moment. The ghost is just the other side of the rotation, which we usually perceive as force or energy.
So if this is true, it changes everything about how we view the universe. It's not a collection of random disconnected particles bumping into each other in a void. It's a seamless, flowing, interconnected geometry.
It suggests the universe is deterministic.
That's a huge philosophical shift. Quantum mechanics has spent 100 years telling us that God plays dice,
Mhm.
that at the fundamental level, reality is based on random probability.
And SGQM effectively says God doesn't play dice, he plays geometry. If you could see the full 12 dimensions, if you could see the Aetheron lattice, you would see the gears turning perfectly, you would see cause and effect. The apparent randomness is just our limited four-dimensional perspective. It's an illusion caused by not seeing the whole machine.
That is surprisingly comforting, to think there's a deep, unshakable order beneath all the chaos we see.
It brings physics back to a kind of classical beauty. It's Pythagorean, it's about harmony and ratio and the logic of shapes.
So we've been down this rabbit hole for a while now. We've rebuilt space into triangles, stopped light from traveling, turned quarks into gears, and turned black holes into cosmic blenders. The big question is, so what? Why should the listener who is maybe driving to work right now care about 12-dimensional manifolds?
Because it's the answer to the question, what are we?
How so?
If everything is just a geometric resonance of the Aetheron, then so are we. Our bodies are just incredibly complex, stable knots in the lattice. Our brains are electrochemical storms, which are just electrons flowing, which in this model are just geometric twists propagating through the fabric.
This leads to the thought I really wanted to end on. That's a bit of a provocation for everyone listening.
Let's hear it.
If our consciousness is fundamentally electrochemical, based on electrons and their interactions, and electrons are just geometric resonances of the Aetheron, then are we just the universe observing its own geometry?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If we are made of the Aetheron, we aren't distinct from it. We are the Aetheron, twisting itself into a shape that's complex enough to look back at itself and ask, how do I work?
We are a self-aware geometric knot.
A beautiful way to put it.
Now, I know there are people listening who are probably screaming at their speakers right now saying, show me the mass, or you completely oversimplified the rank 2 tensor.
And they're right. We did. We absolutely have to. This is a dense, rigorous mathematical proposal. We have barely scratched the surface today.
So if you are one of those people who wants to see the actual equations, the diagrams, the proofs for the 58-element limit, or the derivation of the alpha constant, you need to go to the source.
Absolutely. The full framework is laid out in the book.
The full title is The Full Supersymmetric Geometric Quantum Mechanics, SGQM. The Aetheron Model Framework, including the mathematics and structure behind this model, can be found on Amazon.com.
If you really want to challenge your brain and see the raw mechanics, that's the place to go.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. It was a heavy lift, but I have to say I'm seeing the empty space in this room a little differently now.
Keep looking for the triangles.
Keep spinning the triangle. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.